Prologue. The sky was high and wide, and there wasn't a single cloud in sight. The bright red sun hung motionless, right in the middle of the sky, making the whole world look as red as fire. In the boundless Gobi Desert, a small group of people was struggling to move forward in the yellow sand, where there was no path to follow. Except for the 4 or 5 people in the lead, who were riding mules, horses, or camels, the more than 10 others were chained together in a line. Under the shouts and whippings of several riders, they managed to wriggle forward with great difficulty. The midday sun was burning hot, and both the people and the horses were extremely tired. When they saw the lonely post station up ahead, several riders couldn't help but cheer together and whip the others to quicken their pace. An old man, who looked like a post official, came out to greet them. The leading rider shouted loudly from a distance as soon as he saw him, "Lao, Yan. Hurry up and prepare some fresh water and fodder. This damn weather is almost roasting us alive." There was a blood-red scar on his face, and it kept moving as his expression changed. From a distance, it seemed like there was another mouth on his cheek. "Already prepared, Master Dao," Lao Nian replied, as he walked up to them. He recognized that the man coming was a famous constable on the Ganliang road. His nickname was Scarface, and not many people knew his real name. Although this place was in the territory of King Hai, Scarface was responsible for escorting the prisoners sent from the inland to the Ganliang road, and then sending them further to King Hai to do hard labor. He often passed by this lonely post station, so over time, he naturally got to know Lao Nian. Several constables got off their horses and rushed to the steam buns and fresh water that Lao Nian had prepared. Several prisoners in shackles stumbled and hid in the shade, collapsing on the ground, gasping for breath like fish out of water. Lao Nian picked up a bucket of fresh water and walked towards him. Although he knew that most of the prisoners sent to such a desolate and remote place were very vicious and didn't deserve sympathy, he had been staying alone at this post station for many years and hardly saw a few people throughout the year. So even the prisoners looked quite friendly to him. Lao Nian scooped up a ladle of water, and several prisoners immediately opened their mouths eagerly, trying to get it. Just as Lao Nian was about to feed them, he heard a constable behind him suddenly shout, "Wait!" Lao Nian turned around in confusion and saw a constable approaching with a mischievous smile. The constable snatched the ladle from Lao Nian's hand, threw it back into the bucket, then spread his legs, pulled down his pants, and peed into the bucket with a splash, splash, splash. Only then did he pull up his pants and gestured to Lao Nian, "Go. Feed them with this." Lao Nian looked helplessly at Scarface beside him. Seeing that Scarface didn't stop it, but instead showed an interested smile, Lao Nian had no choice but to scoop up a ladle of the urine water and hand it to a prisoner. The prisoner hesitated for a moment, then closed his eyes and gulped it down in one go. The constables burst out laughing. Amid the laughter of everyone, Lao Nian fed the others one by one. Some of the prisoners looked numb, some had sad faces, and some had anger in their eyes. However, under the extreme thirst and hunger, they still drank it without hesitation. When Lao Nian fed the last prisoner, he saw that the prisoner proudly turned his head away. Lao Nian advised, "Drink it in this weather. How can you survive without water?" "Am a human being. How can I abandon my dignity?" the prisoner said in a hoarse voice. Although his voice was hoarse and dry, it revealed an unyielding pride that couldn't be easily insulted. Dignity. Lao Nian was startled and couldn't help but take a closer look at the other person. He saw that the prisoner was thin and weak, and his eyes made him seem quite young. Although his face was filthy, it still couldn't hide the scholarly air in his bones. "What's going on?" Scarface's inquiry came from behind. Before Lao Nian could explain, Scarface had already strode over, snatched the ladle, spat a thick film into it, and stuffed it into the prisoner's mouth. "If you think the ingredients are not enough, I will add some more for you." The prisoner struggled desperately and knocked the ladle to the ground. Scarface flew into a rage, kicked him down, and scolded harshly, "You ungrateful thing! Why don't you drink it?" The prisoner struggled to sit up on the ground and shouted loudly, I'm a human being, not an animal. Human, how dare you claim to be a human? You scums! Scarface whipped his horsewhip and lashed it across the heads of several prisoners, one by one. You, a human trafficker, you, a rapist, and you, a notorious robber. You bastards, which one of you deserves to be called a human? I wish I could execute you all on the spot, so that I don't have to serve you bastards and escort you to King High in this weather. Scarface then turned back to the prisoner in front of him and whipped him. Especially you? I heard that you were once a scholar, but you raped, killed, cheated, and swindled. For this alone, your crime should be even more severe. I didn't, the prisoner shouted at the top of his lungs. I didn't rape or kill anyone, nor did I cheat or swindle. I was wrongly accused. Humph, every prisoner says so. Scarface said as he scooped up another ladle of urine water and handed it to the prisoner's mouth. I will ask you one more time. Will you drink it or not? The prisoner met Scarface's fierce gaze head on. I'm a human being, not an animal. Scarface suddenly splashed the urine water onto the prisoner's face. Fine. As long as you can hold on until tomorrow, I will admit that you're a human being. Come on, tie him to the hitching post and see how long he can be so stubborn. Several constables dragged the prisoner out from the shade and tied him to the hitching post outside the post station. The sun was blazing overhead and the sand on the ground was scorching hot. Under the roasting from above and the baking from below, a normal person couldn't hold on for long. The prisoner licked his cracked lips, closed his eyes tightly. Although he looked exhausted under the scorching sun, there was still an unyielding and aloof look on his face. Nobody is allowed to give him water. I want to see how long he can last. Scarface said as he beckoned to Launion. Prepare dry fodder. Well, leavely tomorrow morning. As the sky gradually darkened, Launion finished feeding the mules and horses. When he passed by the hitching post, he held up a lantern to take a look. He saw that the prisoner was limply hanging on the wooden post, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. Launion went over to check his breath and found that it was as faint as a thread. Launion knew that if he didn't drink water, he definitely wouldn't survive the night. He couldn't forget the aloof look in the prisoner's eyes during the day, so he couldn't help but scoop up a ladle of fresh water, lifted the prisoner's chin, and carefully poured the water into the prisoner's mouth. After a while, he saw the prisoner's eyelashes tremble slightly, and finally slowly woke up. Thank goodness, I was afraid you wouldn't wake up. Launion muttered as he finished feeding the whole ladle of fresh water. After the prisoner drank his fill, his spirit recovered a little. He couldn't help but choke up and said to Launion, old uncle, thank you for saving me. If I, Wenjia, have a chance to rise in the world one day, I will definitely repay you for this ladle of water. Launion simply waved his hand and said, don't mention repayment. Wait until you can get out of King Hai alive. As far as I know, none of the prisoners sent here to do hard labor have ever managed to leave alive. The prisoner was taken aback and asked, why is that? Launion let out a sigh and replied, they'd rather die on the ground than live underground. Working in the mines as convicts means having meals in the mortal world, but doing the work of the underworld. In a year, countless men are buried alive there. All the prisoners sent there will either be buried in the mines or be tortured to death by the heavy labor. There are no exceptions at all. I want to survive. I've been wrongly accused. I will master extraordinary martial arts and make those who framed me pay the price. The prisoner struggled with all his might. However, his efforts couldn't budge the hitching post. Instead, it made him, who was already exhausted, feel dizzy. Then his whole body went limp and he passed out. I must survive. I have to survive while in a coma, Wenjia was still murmuring. On his filthy face there was a strange glint. Hai's consciousness seemed to have drifted back to the past that he didn't want to remember. People are born good-natured, human natures are similar, but habits make them different. With the clear reading voices of children in the background, Wenjia started another day of his life. Family Village was a small village on the outskirts of Yanzhou. There was a small bridge over flowing water in front of the village, and it was surrounded by mountains at the back, presenting a really beautiful landscape. Well, Wenjia was the only scholar in the village. Highest ancestors were officials who retired and returned to their hometown from the capital. Sadly, in Wenjia's father's generation, due to his gambling addiction, he not only squandered all the family property, but was also forced to hang himself by debt collectors. Since then, the Luo family had declined. Fortunately, Wenjia had a mother who was well educated and sensible. She never slackened in disciplining her son, and finally cultivated him into the only scholar in the village. Wenjia had been determined since childhood to follow his ancestors' example, to become an official through learning and revive his family. To share the burden of his mother, besides studying hard for the imperial examinations, he also opened a private school in the ancestral hall of the village to earn some pocket money to support the family. The sound of horse hooves outside the window caught Wenjia's attention. He saw two rich young masters riding past the window on horseback accompanied by several attendants. The two were chatting animatedly. Among them, an elegant young master in white clothes, and on a white horse kept pointing around with his horsewhip, looking rather stylish. Wenjia recognized that the young master in white was Nangong Fang, the third young master of the renowned Nangong family in Yansu City. Most of the farmland in Wo family village now belonged to the Nangong family, and only a few ancestral graveyards were still in the hands of the clan leader. Recently, he heard that the Nangong family intended to take back the land in Wo family village and build a leisure villa and a racecourse there. This news made the villagers quite uneasy, and everyone hoped that the clan leader Wo Zonghan could prevent it. While Wenjia was lost in thought, he saw a girl in green clothes coming with a basket from afar. Noticing that it was getting late, he quickly asked the children to go home after school, and then went out cheerfully to greet her. The girl walked gracefully up to Wenjia, blushed, and handed the basket in her hand to him, saying, "Brother Wenjia, these are the fruits freshly picked today. Have a taste with auntie." Wenjia quickly took the basket, blushed too, and seemed hesitant to say something. Seeing his embarrassed look, the girl couldn't help but smile charmingly, and waved her hand at him, saying, "You should go back, Ali. I'm leaving now." Watching the girl walk away, Wenjia couldn't help but pick up a bright red apple, and sniffed it, feeling a sweet sensation in his heart. That girl was Zhao Zini, the daughter of Zhao Fugui, a wealthy family in the village. Zhao Fugui was an outsider. Back then, in order to find a backer, he had arranged a marriage by pledging their unborn children with the Wenjia's father, and betrothed his daughter to the Wo family. Later, when the Wo family declined, Zhao Fugui had the thought of breaking off the engagement. However, the two children had been childhood sweethearts, and were already inseparable. Moreover, Wenjia was diligent and fond of learning, and had passed the scholar examination at a young age with a promising future. Only then did Zhao Fugui stop interfering with their interactions. Wenjia didn't take his eyes back until he couldn't see the girl's back anymore. Then he walked back, sniffing the apple. In fact, the girl hadn't gone far. She was hiding behind a big tree by the roadside and peeking. Seeing that he didn't follow, she couldn't help but curse, and her heart full pouted her lips and turned around to leave. Just as she turned around, a sudden neigh of a horse startled her. A fine horse reared up in front of her, almost throwing the rider on its back off. The rider was about to scold when he saw her appearance clearly, and was stunned on the spot. It took the girl quite a while to come to her senses. Just now, she was so focused on peeking at Wenjia that she didn't hear the sound of horse hooves behind her. When she turned around, she almost bumped into the galloping horse. She was about to apologize when she found that the rider was staring straight at her. High's bold and unrestrained gaze made her a little scared. Without bothering to apologize, she lowered her head and walked away. "Beautiful, so beautiful," the rider on the horse was still muttering to himself until Zhao Zini walked away. "I didn't expect that in this remote small village there would be such a rare beauty, like an orchid in an empty valley. Third young master has a good eye." Tang Xiao beside him quickly nodded in agreement. Although Yangzhou is full of beauties, it's rare to see such an earthly beauty, without a trace of vulgarity. At the first watch of the night, Wo Wenjie started his nightly study again. The only thing accompanying him was a dim oil lamp. Although the Wo family had declined and sold all their farmland, after all, their ancestors had been officials in the capital. Although the old house was dilapidated, it covered a large area. There were not only side rooms and backyards, but also all kinds of books in the study. If it weren't for this, Wo Wenjie probably wouldn't have had the chance to study. Just after reading an article from the Analects of Confucius, there was a dull thud from the backyard, as if someone had jumped down from the courtyard wall. Wo Wenjie felt strange in his heart. Could it be that there were thieves visiting this dilapidated house? The weeds at the base of the wall were swaying slightly. Wo Wenjie held up the lamp to take a look, and saw an old man in black clothes lying in the grass, covered in blood, with his eyes closed and breathing slightly. After the initial moment of fear passed, Wo Wenjie couldn't help but whisper, "Old uncle. Old uncle." The old man mumbled in response, but didn't open his eyes. Wo Wenjie was kind-hearted by nature. Seeing that the old man was seriously injured, he quickly helped him to the study and laid him on the reclining chair. The old man didn't seem to be very old, but his temples were already graying. His face was weather-beaten and gaunt, without much flesh. Even with his eyes closed, his appearance still looked somewhat stern. Seeing that the old man's breath was weak, Wo Wenjie quickly asked, "Old uncle, where are you injured? I will go and invite a doctor right away." Just as he turned around to leave, he was grabbed by the wrist by the old man. The old man's hand was as powerful as an eagle's claw. Even though he was seriously injured, Wo Wenjie couldn't break free. The old man pointed feebly at his own chest. "There's medicine here." Wo Wenjie untied the old man's clothes and found the medicine bottles in his arms. He quickly asked how to use them. "Take the pills orally and apply the powder externally," the old man said with effort, and then was gasping for breath. Wo Wenjie gave the old man the pills as he said. Then he tore open the old man's blood-stained shirt in front of his chest. Who knew that the flesh and blood were connected? And the old man let out a loud cry in pain and fainted. Wo Wenjie quickly applied the medicine powder to the old man's wound on the chest, and then tore off a piece of his shirt to wrap the wound. After finishing all this, he found that there was a small package hidden close to the old man's body, which had been soaked by blood. Wo Wenjie was afraid that it would stick to the wound, so he gently pulled it out. The package wasn't heavy in his hand. It was long and square, like a book. Wo Wenjie was obsessed with books by nature, so he casually untied the brocade handkerchief wrapped around it, and took a closer look. Inside was indeed a thick sheepskin booklet, about half an inch thick. It looked very old, and on the cover there were 4 big characters, written in a very rare ancient seal script, secret code of Qian men. Wo Wenjie had read a wide variety of books since childhood, and had some knowledge of the various schools of thought in ancient China, but he had never heard of such a book. He felt a bit strange and casually opened the first page. There was only a short sentence on it, also written in that ancient seal script. He read it softly. "Humans neither have the claws and fangs of tigers and wolves, nor the strength of lions and elephants. However, they can capture wolves and bind tigers, tame lions and hunt elephants. There's no other reason but wisdom." What is this? Wo Wenjie scratched his head in confusion. Just as he was about to turn to the second page, he suddenly felt his collar tighten at the back, and his neck was grasped. Then a cold light flashed before his eyes, and a dagger was pressed against his eyelids. A cold shout came from behind him. "How dare you read our secret code privately? You deserve to have your eyes gouged out." Wo Wenjie hurriedly threw the book away. Only then did he find that the old man who had been on the reclining chair had come behind him, and was pressing the dagger against his eyelids. He quickly said, "Please spare my life, old uncle. I didn't know." "What did you see?" "I didn't see anything, except that sentence on the first page." "Since you've seen it, your eyes should be gouged out." As the old man said this, he tightened his wrist, and was about to do it, when suddenly there was a crisp sound of a dry branch breaking outside the window. The old man was startled, and suddenly turned Wowenjia's body around. Then he reversed the dagger, forced the hilt into Wowenjia's hand, grasped his wrist, and pushed it towards his own chest, thrusting the dagger into the wound on his chest. These actions happened in the blink of an eye. When Wowenjia came to his senses, he found that he was holding the dagger, and had stabbed the old man in the chest. Then he saw the old man slowly falling backward. Wowenjia, holding the blood-stained dagger in his hand, was so frightened that he froze on the spot and stammered to defend himself. I didn't mean it. Suddenly, the window lattice split silently, and two men in black clothes flashed in with long swords in their hands. When they saw the situation in the room clearly, their expressions changed drastically. They quickly raised their swords to be on guard, and stared at Wowenjia together and shouted, "Did you kill him?" "No, it wasn't me." Wowenjia quickly threw away the dagger, and pointed at the old man lying on the ground. "It was him." The two men in black looked at the old man on the ground, who had no breath left, and then at the helpless Wowenjia. They couldn't help shouting, "Since you killed him, that thing must be in your hands. Hand it over quickly." "What thing?" Wowenjia looked bewildered. "Here it is." Another man in black suddenly noticed the sheepskin book lying on the ground, and his eyes lit up immediately. Just as he was about to reach out to pick it up, he saw a cold light flash beside him. His companion's sword had actually stabbed into his waist. The man in black staggered back while covering his wound and angrily shouted, "You!" The man in black, who had launched the sneak attack, gave a sinister smile. "The secret code of Qianmen, everyone wants to possess it. You can't blame me." As he said this, he stabbed his companion again, and killed him. At this moment, the old man who had been lying on the ground suddenly jumped up and chopped at the throat of the man in black with his palm. The man in black didn't expect the old man to come back to life, and was immediately hit on the throat. With a painful cry, he slowly collapsed to the ground with his eyes wide open. The old man's sudden movement tugged at his wound, causing blood to spurt out once more and soak the front of his shirt completely. He slumped to the ground, gasping for air heavily, and beckoned to the stunned Wowenjia with his finger, saying, "Come here." "I won't." Wowenjia retreated in fright. "Don't worry. I won't harm you." The old man picked up the sheepskin book and put it into his bosom, speaking softly, "You saved me just now, and I won't make things difficult for you. If we meet again in the future, I will surely repay you for saving my life." "No need." Wowenjia waved his hands hurriedly. Seeing that the old man meant no harm, he couldn't help but ask uneasily, "I don't know how to address you, old uncle. And why were you being chased and killed?" "My surname is Yun, and you can call me Master Yun." "The less you know about these murderous incidents in the martial arts world, the better." The old man pointed at the corpses on the ground and said, "Quickly help me bury them." The Wowenjia was so terrified by the blood and corpses that he lost his ability to think. At the old man's order, he immediately went to the backyard and dug a large pit, then roughly buried the two corpses. When he returned to the study, after finishing this task, the old man had vanished without a trace. Clang, clang, clang! Suddenly, the urgent sound of a gong came from the ancestral hall, which was rather conspicuous in the night. This gong sound was an emergency signal to gather the clansmen. Wowenjia didn't have time to inform his mother, and rushed to the ancestral hall at once. Many clansmen had gathered in the ancestral hall. The clan leader, Wo Zonghan, stood proudly on the high platform. Under the illumination of lanterns and torches, his face was livid, the short beard under his chin was trembling slightly, and there was a determined and cold glint in his eyes. When most of the clansmen had arrived, he said loudly, "Today, the third young master of the Nangong family in Yanzhou came to our door in person and offered 3 times the price, asking us to move away and give up all the land in Wo family village. What do you all think?" "How can that be?" Someone immediately objected loudly. "Our Wo family has lived here for generations. Even our ancestors' graves are buried here. How can we move?" "Yes," others echoed one after another, "there's never been a situation where people move their ancestors' graves along with them. Luo Zonghan said in a clear voice, "Today, Nangong Fan has made it clear that if we don't move, starting from tonight, one person in our Wo family village will die every day." I thought he was just bluffing, but who knew that just after it got dark tonight, someone in the village really died mysteriously. That's why I gathered everyone here, to discuss this matter. He waved his hand, and two young men carried in a stretcher, with a hunchback corpse on it. Everyone recognized that the deceased was Granny, an old lonely woman, who had wandered to Luo family village from other places. "I've examined Granny Mi's body," Luo Zonghan told everyone. "There were neither wounds nor signs of poisoning found. Even if we reported it to the authorities, they would just think that she died of old age. However, I don't believe it's such a coincidence. It seems that Nangong Fan killed an unrelated person, first to warn us. If we still persist, the next one will be one of our Luo family members." Everyone looked at each other in dismay, and the ancestral hall suddenly fell silent. Then the young man suddenly raised his arm and shouted loudly, "We must never back down. We can't let others bully us." This shout was echoed by many young descendants. A satisfied smile appeared in Luo Zonghan's eyes, and he said with pride, "Starting from today, each household should send one male adult, carry weapons with them, and immediately rush to gather in the ancestral hall when they hear the gong sound, to deal with all unexpected incidents. On ordinary days, they will take turns to patrol and keep guard in the village." Luo Zonghan suddenly noticed Luo Wenjia and quickly said, "Wenjia, your family has few people, and you're a scholar. You don't need to engage in things like using swords and clubs. Just study hard." "Great Uncle," Luo Wenjia said hesitantly, "let's report this to the authorities. If we privately organize an armed force, it's a serious violation of the laws of the Ming dynasty." Luo Zonghan was startled, and then said angrily, "You're really a bookish scholar. How come the laws of the Ming dynasty don't do anything about these powerful martial arts families, like the Nangong family? In this world, it's the law of the jungle. Whoever doesn't have a sword for self-defense will only be bullied, and at the mercy of others. Report to the authorities nowadays, which official cares about justice instead of money? I think you become muddled from reading too much, and don't even understand the basic ways of the world. All right, just focus on your studies, and prepare for the imperial examinations. I hope you can obtain an official position one day, so that our Luo family won't be bullied anymore." Luo Wenjia still wanted to argue, but he saw that Luo Zonghan was already arranging the manpower for guard and patrol, and didn't have time to pay attention to him, a useless scholar. He had to leave the ancestral hall and go home alone. Just as he reached the big banyan tree in front of the ancestral hall, the lantern in his hand suddenly went out without any wind. Luo Wenji's vision went black, and then he felt his body suddenly lifted up and land on the high branches of the tree, several dozen feet above the ground. Luo Wenjia was terrified, and quickly hugged the tree trunk. He opened his mouth to shout, but then he felt a numbness in his back, and he couldn't make a single sound from his mouth. "Damn it, I didn't expect Luo Zonghan to be so stubborn. I should have killed him first if I had known." A hoarse complaint sounded beside him. Luo Wenjia turned his head to look, and found a man in black with long hair hanging over his shoulders, clinging to the tree trunk like a snake, with his legs wrapped around a slanting branch, looking down at the situation inside the ancestral hall, from above the banyan tree. "The third young master has instructed us not to touch Luo Zonghan," hissed the clan leader. "As long as he bows his head, the whole Luo family village will be in our hands. The third young master doesn't want to deal with each household one by one. That would be too troublesome." A sweet and coquettish voice came from behind, making one's ears itch. Luo Wenjia turned around to look, and saw a woman in white clothes, lazily leaning against the branches. Her long legs were softly wrapped around the tree trunk, just like a white snake taking a nap on the tree. And the collar at the back of his own clothes was being held by her, with her orchid fingers raised. The man in black coiled his body, and quietly climbed onto the branch. He coldly glanced at Luo Wenjia, and complained to the woman in white, "Why did you bring him up here?" The woman in white gave a light laugh. "I want to ask him what arrangements Wo Zonghan has made." "Is there any need to ask?" The man in black snorted coldly. "What kind of arrangements can these country bumpkins make that could pose a threat to us, the black and white snakes?" "Better be safe than sorry," the woman in white said, as she turned Wo Wenjia's head around and looked at him with a smile. "So you're a handsome scholar. Judging by your attire, you're a scholar, right? Tell sister, what exactly is Wo Zonghan up to?" As she said this, she patted Wo Wenjia on the chest. Wo Wenjia immediately felt that the stuffiness in his chest eased a lot, and his voice was no longer hoarse and silent. By the hazy moonlight, Wo Wenjia managed to make out the face of the woman in white. She didn't seem to be very old, but there was a sense of vicissitudes in her eyes, as if she had experienced a lot in life. She had willow leaf-shaped eyebrows, almond-shaped eyes, a small and delicate nose and mouth. When she smiled slightly, two dimples appeared on her cheeks. If her complexion hadn't been so pale as to be a bit frightening, she could be considered quite beautiful. Although he didn't know their names, from the conversation between the two just now, Wo Wenjia guessed that she must be the white snake among the black and white snakes. At this moment, seeing her looking at him with a half-smile, Wo Wenjia immediately stiffened his neck and said, "I won't tell you. Don't even think about forcing me. Don't waste your time." The man in black rushed to Wo Wenjia like a snake and raised his hand at him. "Just kill him directly. Anyway, we're going to kill someone tomorrow." "Wait." The woman in white blocked the man's hand. "The third young master has ordered that we can only kill at most one person a day. Killing people isn't the purpose. The main thing is to drive the people in Wo family village away." The man in black snorted again coldly. "Humph, I think you, this lascivious snake, have some evil thoughts again. Be careful not to mess up the important matter. See how you'll explain it to the third young master." "Shut up," the woman in white scolded coquettishly, and launched a palm strike at the man in black. Taking advantage of the moment when the two were distracted, Wo Wenjia suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs, "Help! Help!" The people in the ancestral hall rushed out and surrounded the banyan tree in the blink of an eye. Although the big banyan tree stood alone in front of the ancestral hall, it was thick enough for people to encircle with their arms. Its spreading crown was like a huge umbrella, completely hiding the people on the tree. Moreover, in the darkness of the night, for a while everyone couldn't see where the black and white snakes were hiding. "All right, let's go. Don't have a direct confrontation with them," the white snake said as she playfully pinched Wo Wenjia's cheek. "Master Wo, stand firm. Be careful not to fall. Sister will come to see you another day." As she said this, she raised her hand, and a soft whip several dozen feet long appeared in her hand. She gently swung it and wrapped it around a branch in the distance. Then her body swung gracefully like a nimble snake among the branches, floating out several dozen feet. After that, she retracted the whip in the air, bent her body, and by using the inertia, she flew over a distance of more than 10 dozen feet and landed lightly on the roof of the ancestral hall. The black snake also swung towards the ancestral hall, just like her. Wo Wenjia stared at this scene in astonishment. It took him a while to come to his senses. Then he pointed at the place where they landed and shouted, "They're there. They're on the roof." The people under the tree heard Wo Wenjia's directions and quickly looked up at the roof of the ancestral hall, but there was no sign of the two at all. Everyone hurriedly helped Wo Wenjia down from the tree. After hearing him tell everything that had just happened, everyone was a bit skeptical. In the world, they had never heard of such strange people as the black and white snakes. Only Wo Zonghan had a solemn expression on his face. He said to everyone, "The martial arts world is so big, and there are so many capable people. If it's really like what Wenjia said, and that man and woman are the strange people hired by Nangong Fang to deal with us, I'm afraid Wo family village is really in trouble." Unfortunately, Wenjia's words have no proof. It would be hard for people to believe, even if we reported it to the authorities. We can only strengthen our guard. From tonight on, we'll form groups of 10 people each. Never act alone. Everyone agreed in unison, and then took their leave, and went home one after another. Just as day was breaking, Wenjia heard the sound of the gong gathering the clansmen again. He rushed to the ancestral hall in a hurry, and saw that Zonghan had a miserable look on his face, and seemed to have aged a lot overnight. There was a corpse lying in the middle of the ancestral hall, and it was none other than his eldest son, Xiaolong. Seeing that all the clansmen had arrived, Zonghan looked around at everyone and said, "After hearing Wenjia's description last night, I knew that with our strength, we couldn't deal with the black and white snakes at all. So early this morning, I sent along to the martial arts school in Yangtze to invite Ding Jianfen, the famous iron palm shaking the south of the Yangtze River. Master Ding has a good reputation as a chivalrous man. Years ago, when he suffered extremely serious internal injuries, it was I who carried him over 3 mountain ridges to find a famous doctor and saved his life. So he owes me a favor. If he can come to our aid, he will surely be able to deal with the black and white snakes." Who knew that just as Alon left the village entrance, he was brought back by his horse. There wasn't a single wound on his whole body, but he was already dead. It seems that the black and white snakes are determined to deal with us, and won't allow anyone to leave the family village. Let's fight them to the death." Everyone was filled with indignation and shouted in unison. Zonghan shook his head and sighed. "The black and white snakes are hiding in the dark. Even if we want to fight with all our might, we don't know where to start. It seems that I have to go to Yangtze myself. As long as I can invite Master Ding to help us, the family village will be safe." Seeing the worry in the eyes of the clansmen, Zonghan forced a smile and said casually, "Don't worry. I used to wander around in the martial arts world in the past. The 9-ringed saber in my hand has drunk the blood of many villains. If I encounter the black and white snakes, and they try to stop me, even if I can't defeat them, I won't have much trouble getting away." After saying that, he was about to go out when Wenjia stepped forward from among the crowd and said, "Great uncle, if I take another route and secretly rush to Yangtze, will it be more certain?" Zonghan knew that, if he encountered the black and white snakes to stop him, with his limited martial arts skills, he couldn't protect himself at all. If Wenjia secretly rushed to Yangtze, by another route, it would indeed be a good idea. Thinking of this, he took out a piece of jade pendant from his bosom, and handed it to Wenjia, saying, "This is the keepsake that Master Ding left with me back then. He once told me that, if I was in danger, as long as I sent someone with this keepsake to see him, he would not hesitate to go through fire and water for me. When you see Master Ding, just show him this jade pendant, and he will naturally know what to do." "Great uncle, don't worry. I won't let you down." Wenjia quickly put the jade pendant into his bosom, and hid it well. Zonghan patted Wenjia's shoulder with satisfaction. "You are well educated and eloquent. Only you can be trusted to deliver this message. I will take the main road to draw away the black and white snakes for you. You should take the waterway at night and rush to Yangtze. The lives of hundreds of people in our family village depend on us to now." The Yangtze Martial Arts School was quite famous in Yangtze. When Wenjia found it, the disciples in the school were having an intense morning practice. Wenjia handed the jade pendant to the doorman, and asked him to pass it on to Master Ding. After a while, a tall and sturdy old man in brown clothes strode out, accompanied by several disciples, and came straight to Wenjia, asking, "Young man, were you the one who brought this jade pendant? May I ask what relation you have with Zonghan?" "Yes, my great uncle," Wenjia quickly replied. "So you're the grandson of my benefactor. I'm Ding Jianfen. Young man, please come inside quickly." Wenjia immediately bowed down to the ground. "Master Ding, please save family village." "What are you doing, young man?" Ding Jianfen hurriedly helped Wenjia up. "Let's go inside and talk slowly. Your great uncle once saved my life. No matter how big the matter is, I won't stand by idly." The two of them came to the side hall, in the inner room. After Ding Jianfen heard the whole story of why Wu Wenjie came to ask for help, his expression became solemn, and he asked in a hoarse voice, "How is your great-uncle now?" Seeing Wu Wenjie sadly shake his head, Ding Jianfen let out a heavy sigh. "Young man, don't worry. If your great-uncle unfortunately dies at the hands of the black and white snakes, I will surely kill those two beasts for you." However, seeing Ding Jianfen hesitate to speak further, Wu Wenjie quickly asked, "However what?" "Master Ding, you can just say it." Ding Jianfen hesitated and said, "If the Nangong family offers a suitable price, I think you'd better persuade your great-uncle to sell Wu family village to Nangong." Fan. What? Wu Wenjie's face changed with anger. "Wu family village is not only the foundation for our survival, but also the place where our ancestors' graves are located. How can it be sold? If my great-uncle was willing to sell it, why would he send me to ask you for help?" "Master Ding, are you saying this because the Nangong family is so powerful that even you don't dare to provoke them?" Ding Jianfen shook his head with a bitter smile. "Powerful? Ordinary people don't understand the real meaning of these words." He casually pointed around. "Young man, do you think my martial arts school looks magnificent?" Wu Wenjie nodded. "Before I came here, I never expected that the Yangtze Martial Arts School would be so grand and large. It truly deserves to be called the #1 martial arts school in the south of the Yangtze River." "It's actually the property of the Nangong family," Ding Jianfen said with a bitter smile. "Every single plant and tree here, including the martial arts instructors in the school, belongs to the Nangong family. I'm called the master of the school, but I'm just an idle person, kept by the Nangong family. They can ask me to leave any time they want. In this city of Yanzhou, almost half of the properties belong to the Nangong family. It's no exaggeration to say that they're as wealthy as a country. Moreover, they curry favor with powerful eunuchs in the court, make connections with people from all walks of life. Virtually all the gangs in the Jiangnan area, big or small, have countless ties with them. Even the local officials have to act according to their wishes. It's not too much to say that they're like local emperors. In Yanzhou, you can oppose the officials, but you can't oppose the Nangong family. That's the common sense for surviving here." Wu Wenjie was stunned on the spot. After a long while, he said in a hoarse voice, "I understand. So the famous iron palm shaking the south of the Yangtze River is just a... I don't dare to ask for your help anymore. Farewell." "Where are you going, young man?" "Don't trouble Master Ding. Even if the Nangong family has absolute power in Yanzhou, I believe there are still places in this world that they can't reach." Seeing Wu Wenjie leave with pride, Ding Jianfen hesitated for a moment, and then suddenly gritted his teeth and chased after Wu Wenjie. "Young man, wait. I can't let my benefactor down." As he said this, he took Wu Wenjie's arm without hesitation and strode out of the door in the astonished gazes of the disciples. The carriage rumbled along and finally stopped in front of an ancient mansion. Wu Wenjie got off the carriage, following Ding Jianfen. Looking around, he saw that the walls of the mansion were mottled, the gate was dull, and the stone lions on both sides of the gate were covered with moss. Although it looked rather old, it had a sense of vicissitudes and majesty accumulated over the years. "Where is this?" Wu Wenjie asked in confusion. As soon as the words left his mouth, he saw the several simple yet powerful characters hidden under the eaves of the lintel Nangong mansion. The gate creaked open with a heavy sound, and an old servant stuck his head out. "It's Master Ding. Uncle Fu, I have an urgent matter, and would like to request an audience with the head of the Nangong family. Please inform him for me. Do you have an invitation or visiting card?" the old servant asked. "I came in a hurry and didn't prepare a visiting card," Ding Jianfen said as he stuffed a silver ingot into the old man's hand. The old servant weighed it casually in his hand and looked embarrassed. "Master Ding, you know the rules of our family. Without an invitation or a visiting card, even if the prefect of Yanzhou came to visit, the head of the family wouldn't see anyone. Please trouble Uncle Fu to pass on the message." Ding Jianfen had a flattering smile on his face, completely losing his previous heroic air. The old servant sighed and put away the silver. Only Master Ding has such great influence. If it were someone else, even if they gave me a mountain of gold, I wouldn't dare to break the rules. As he said this, he left Ding Jianfen and Wo Wenjia, and went straight inside. Ding Jianfen let out a sigh of relief, and stood outside the gate waiting patiently. Seeing this, Wo Wenjia couldn't help but complain, "This Nangong Rui has such a big air. Does he really think he's the emperor? Don't talk recklessly, young man." Ding Jianfen quickly said, "Given the position of the Nangong family in the Jiangnan area, even the imperial family is no different. When you meet the head of the Nangong family later, you mustn't be disrespectful in your words and spoil the important matter." Wu Wenjia was about to argue when he saw the old servant, who had just left, quickly come out and gesture to them, "Master Ding, the head of the family invites you in." The two of them followed the old servant through the main gate, across the patio and into the second gate, then through the winding lawn corridors, and finally arrived outside a side hall. They saw an amiable old man in purple clothes, coming out of the hall to greet them with a smile, and clasped his hands in greeting. "Master Ding, what brings you, such a rare guest, here?" Ding Jianfen quickly returned the salute and said, "I took the liberty to come here uninvited. I hope I haven't disturbed your peaceful cultivation." "Not at all," Nangong Rui smiled, and welcomed the two of them into the hall. "I wonder what brings Master Ding to visit suddenly." Ding Jianfen quickly said, "I heard that your family is purchasing farmland in the suburbs, including Wo family village where my young friend here is from." "Is there such a thing?" Nangong Rui was startled and said, "Yes, the third son is handling this matter." "What's the matter?" Ding Jianfen hesitated, and said, "The clan leader of the Wo family village, Wo Zonghan, once saved my life. I wonder if you could show mercy and let him off for my sake?" Nangong Rui looked surprised and said, "What do you mean by that, Master Ding? Could it be that the third son deliberately lowered the price, and was actually trying to seize it by force?" "It's not about the price," Ding Jianfen quickly said. "The Wo family has lived there for generations. My benefactor really doesn't want to sell the ancestral property. Considering that the Nangong family owns thousands of hectares of fertile land, you don't lack that piece of barren mountainous land. I hope you can withdraw your decision. This is a bit difficult to handle." Nangong Rui rubbed his hands in embarrassment. "Our family is partnering with the Tan clan to build a racecourse in the suburbs. As you know, the suburbs of Yangzhou are crisscrossed with rivers, and it's really hard to find such a large area of dry land. Now, within a radius of 10 miles around Wo family village, our family and the Tan clan have already invested hundreds of thousands of taels of silver successively. We can't just give up halfway, can we? Besides, this is a cooperation with the Tan clan. Even if I disregard the plan agreed upon by the clan, and withdraw my decision for your sake, the Tan clan will definitely not agree." Ding Jianfen didn't expect that this matter was so complicated, and involved so much. He couldn't help but look at Wo Wenjia with a troubled expression. He wanted to continue pleading with Nangong Rui, but didn't know how to start. Just then Nangong Rui said again, "However, since Master Ding has spoken up, I can't not give you face. I will ask the third son to increase the price by another 20%. You can also help persuade your friend to understand that we are determined to acquire Wo family village. Other than that, everything is negotiable." Although Nangong Rui's tone was calm, Ding Jianfen could still sense his determination. He had no choice but to turn his gaze to Wo Wenjia, hoping that he would put aside his stubbornness about keeping Wo family village and try to get a better price instead. But he saw Wo Wenjia stand up gracefully and give Ding Jianfen a respectful salute. "Thank you, Master Ding, for your help. I will always remember your great kindness." Ding Jianfen let out a sigh of relief, and was about to comfort him, when he saw that Wo Wenjia had already turned to Nangong Rui, and said with pride, "Master Nangong, it's not that the Wo family village can't be sold. There's just one condition." "What condition? Just tell me." Nangong Rui quickly asked. "As long as you are willing to exchange the ancestral graves of the Nangong family with us, we will move away immediately." The smile on Nangon Rui's face froze. He slowly picked up his teacup and said in a flat tone, "Show the guests out." Ding Jianfeng's expression changed drastically. He quickly clasped his hands and apologized. The young man didn't know what he was saying. "You are magnanimous, Master Nangon. Please don't take it to heart." Nangon Rui gave a faint smile. "I won't haggle with a child. Master Ding, there's no need to be so polite. Master Nangon, I will answer on behalf of my great-uncle right now. Even if there's only one person left, Wo family village will never be sold." After saying that, Wo Wenjie turned around and left. "I don't believe that there's no law in this world. I don't believe that your Nangon family can really cover the sky with one hand." Seeing Wo Wenjie leave in a huff, Ding Jianfen quickly clasped his hands towards Nangon Rui and hurriedly chased out of the gate, asking, "Where are you going, young man?" Wo Wenjie turned around and said, "Master Ding, you've done your best. Although the result isn't satisfactory, you've already repaid my great-uncle's kindness. I'm still extremely grateful to you. From now on, you and the Wo family don't owe each other anything. You don't need to concern yourself with our affairs anymore." Ding Jianfen froze on the spot, looking at Wo Wenjie's proud figure as he left with a face full of shame. He saw Wo Wenjie stop in front of a small stall, selling fried fritters, bought one, and started chewing on it vigorously. It seemed that the encounter just now hadn't affected his appetite at all. Ding Jianfen walked slowly to the small stall, with his hands behind his back. The peddler, who was busy in front of the opan, quickly stopped what he was doing and greeted him with a smile. "Master Ding, would you like to as well?" Ding Jianfen just gave an indistinct and stared at the boiling opan in silence. Just as the peddler turned around to get the fritters, Ding Jianfen gritted his teeth and plunged his hands into the scalding opan. Ah! With Ding Jianfeng's shrill scream, a strange smell of roasted meat immediately filled the air. The peddler stared at this scene in astonishment, unable to react for a long while. "Master Ding, what are you doing?" Wo Wenjie looked at Ding Jianfen in horror. His face was as pale as paper, and he was trembling all over with pain. He lifted his horribly mangled hands out of the opan and gave Wo Wenjie a tragic smile. "Young man, please tell your great-uncle that my iron palms are ruined, and I can't help him any more." As soon as he finished speaking, his whole body went limp, and he suddenly fainted to the ground. Everyone rushed to help Ding Jianfen up in a flurry, and hurriedly carried him to the medical clinic. Even after everyone had gone far away, Wo Wenjie still couldn't believe his eyes. Was the Nangong family really so terrifying that Ding Jianfen, known as the Iron Palm shaking the south of the Yangtze River, would rather cripple his own palms than oppose them? Suddenly, he felt a chill running down his spine, his hands and feet turning ice cold, and a sense of coldness spreading throughout his whole body, from the bottom of his heart. "I don't believe it!" Wo Wenjie forcibly suppressed the fear in his heart, and swore secretly, "I don't believe that there's no justice or law in this world. I don't believe that the Nangong family can cover the sky with one hand." Angrily throwing away the fritter in his hand, Wo Wenjie strode forward quickly. Not far ahead was the yamen of the prefect of Yangzhou. Outside the solemn and dignified yamen, a huge drum for lodging complaints stood tall, giving a glimmer of hope to people in despair. Boom, boom, boom! The dull drumbeats enlivened the lifeless yamen. The yamen runners, who had been dozing off outside, immediately perked up and shouted in unison, hosts beating the drum. "I have a grievance." Wo Wenjie handed over the hastily written complaint paper. "I want to see the prefect, Your Excellency." "Wait a moment." A yamen runner threw out these words and rushed inside. After a while, the solemn and imposing shouts of the yamen runners came from within the yamen. "Court is now in session." Wo Wenjie walked into the main hall, with his head held high, under the watchful eyes of several yamen runners. He saw an official dressed in splendid robes and sashes, with a fair complexion and no beard, already sitting upright behind the desk. Judging from his attire, he was Fi Shiking, the prefect of Yangzhou. "Hey, host that down there! Why don't you kneel before me?" Fi Shiking slapped the gavel, and the yamen runners on both sides immediately shouted in unison, with the momentum was quite intimidating. Wu Wenjie clasped his hands, neither haughtily nor humbly, and said, "Your Excellency, I have an academic title. According to the laws of the Ming dynasty, I don't need to kneel when meeting any official." "So you're a scholar," Fai Shiking sneered. "Present the complaint paper." The clerk beside him presented the complaint paper to the court. Fai Shiking took it and looked at it, and his face immediately changed. He threw the paper down and said, "What utter nonsense! Throw him out for me? Your Excellency, I don't know which part of my complaint paper is nonsense." Wu Wenjie asked loudly. Fai Shiking snorted coldly. "You said that Nangong Fan, the third young master of the Nangong family, sent the killers, the black and white snakes, to repeatedly kill the villages in Wu family village, because he wanted to forcibly buy the land of your clan. Do you have any proof for this? I saw it with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears. Besides that, do you have any other witnesses or evidence?" Wu Wenjie was at a loss for words, and said helplessly, "No." Fai Shiking sneered, "There's neither a witness nor evidence. How can you be sure that those people were killed by the black and white snakes? And how can you blame their deaths on the Nangong family? Isn't this just nonsense?" Wu Wenjie wept and bowed. "Your Excellency, people in Wu family village are still dying. Even if the case described in this complaint paper isn't detailed enough, you should first send someone to Wu family village to find out the situation and ensure the safety of the villages. I don't need you to teach me how to handle a case." Fai Shiking sneered. "Go back and wait for 10 days or half a month. If people in Wu family village are still dying, I will send someone to investigate thoroughly." 10 days or half a month? Wu Wenjie was startled and couldn't help but shout, "Then dozens more people in Wu family village will die. How can you bear to?" Before he could finish speaking, Fai Shiking had already left with a flick of his sleeves, and the yamen runners also shouted in unison, "Court is urgent." Wu Wenjie still wanted to argue, but he was dragged out of the gate by the yamen runners and thrown out. Wu Wenjie struggled to get up from the ground. He saw that the yamen gate was tightly closed, and several yamen runners were guarding outside, not allowing him to approach. He could only point at the yamen and shout, "I don't believe it. I don't believe there's no justice in this world. I don't believe that the Nangong family can cover the sky with one hand. If you, the prefect of Yanzhou, don't care, I will report it to the Judicial Commissioner's office in Jinling. If the Judicial Commissioner's office also doesn't care, I will go to the capital to submit a petition to the emperor." After saying that, he turned around and left. Who knew that? He almost bumped into someone behind him. Looking up, he saw Nangong Fan, dressed in white as snow, and looking elegant and charming. Nangong Fan gave a faint smile. "Scholar Wu, you're joking. I, Nangong Fan, have always abided by the law. Why should I be afraid of others' false accusations? On the contrary, Scholar Wu should be careful. Don't commit any crimes and end up in prison. That would be a disgrace to scholars, and a shame to the ancient sages." Wu Wenjie snorted coldly and turned around to leave. Nangong Fan watched him go away, and the smile on his face gradually turned into a sneer. Just then, Fai Shiking hurriedly walked out through the main gate. "Third young master, don't worry," Fai Shiking said with a smile. "I've already sent that poor scholar who came to accuse you back home." "I'm afraid that's not enough," Nangong Fan said casually. "If he really takes a complaint paper and goes to the capital to submit a petition to the emperor, although there's no evidence, once it reaches the ears of the ignorant common people who don't know the truth, it will still damage the reputation of the Nangong family." Fai Shiking was startled and quickly said, "You're absolutely right, third young master. I will definitely find a way to stop him." Nangong Fan smiled faintly. "Your Excellency should send someone to keep an eye on him, and be careful that he commits crimes." Fai Shiking was taken aback and quickly asked, "Did third young master find that he committed crimes?" Nangong Fan gave a sinister smile. "Not yet, but I believe he will soon." Fai Shiking nodded knowingly. "Don't worry, third young master. I will send someone to keep an eye on him right away. Once we find that he behaves improperly, we'll arrest him immediately." Then I will rely on your excellency Phi to do your best to maintain local order. Nangong Fan clasped his hands and bowed. The two of them exchanged a knowing smile, and they both saw each other's promises in each other's eyes. Wandering on the bustling streets of Yanzhou, Wu Wenjie found that he only had a few taels of silver left on him. With this little money, not to mention hiring a carriage to go to Jinling, even if he walked there, it probably wouldn't be enough for accommodation, food, and drinks on the way. While he was in a dilemma, a small shop on the street caught his attention. He went in, and when he came out, he had a banner in his hand, which read, "Write family letters and couplets for customers, and also sell ink-wash landscapes and portraits." Full of ambition, he held the banner high. Gradually, Wu Wenjie felt a bit more confident. Although he didn't have much money for the journey, with his calligraphy and painting skills that he had practiced hard for many years, it should be no problem to earn money while making his way to the provincial capital. However, after walking along 5 streets with the banner, his confidence began to waver. Although there were people coming and going on the street, no one even took a second look at his beautifully written banner, let alone asked him to write couplets, paint hanging scrolls, or draw pictures. As the sky was getting darker, Wu Wenjie's mood became more and more depressed. Desperately, he was about to roll up the banner and tear it into pieces in a few moments, when he heard a soft and gentle inquiry from behind in the Wu dialect. "Sir, can you paint?" "Yes, of course I can," Wu Wenjie replied as he turned his head. He saw a little girl dressed in green behind him. She was about 14 or 15 years old and looked really cute. Wu Wenjie quickly unfolded the banner and eagerly said, "Calligraphy and painting are my specialties. I started practicing calligraphy at the age of 5 and painting at the age of 7. It's been over 10 years now. I wonder what you'd like to paint, miss?" Inkwash landscapes, meticulous figure paintings, or paintings of flowers, plants, fish, and insects. The little girl pursed her lips and smiled. "It's not for me to have a painting done, but for my young lady. Today, she asked me to find a painter to draw a portrait for her. Who knew that I met you as soon as I went out, so I asked." "A portrait, no problem at all," Wu Wenjie quickly said. "I can go and draw it for her right now. However," the little girl added, "my young lady has a condition." "What condition?" Wu Wenjie asked hurriedly. "You must cover your eyes and aren't allowed to peek on the way. I will lead you there." The little girl gestured. "And you can't tell anyone about what happens today. You have to swear." Wu Wenjie was startled. He had never heard of such a condition before. But then he thought that perhaps the young lady from a wealthy family had strict family education and didn't want strange men to guess her family background. Thinking of this, he quickly nodded. "No problem at all. I swear that I will never tell anyone about what happens today." Wu Wenjie obediently let the little girl cover his eyes and was led by her to get on a soft and comfortable carriage. The carriage swayed for the time it took to have a meal before it finally stopped. Then he heard the little girl cheer, "We're here." Wu Wenjie was led by the little girl to get off the carriage. He followed her through the long corridor and finally stopped in a warm and fragrant room. Then the little girl said, "You can take off the handkerchief now." Wu Wenjie took off the handkerchief and found himself in a boudoir. It was as warm as spring in the room. On the soft chair in the middle, a languid and charming beauty was reclining. Her face was like a peach blossom, and her phoenix-like eyes were captivating. She was amazingly beautiful. Wu Wenjie blushed and lowered his head, not daring to look around anymore. When drawing the portrait for the young lady named Yi Hong, Wu Wenjie could hear his heart pounding. If it weren't for drawing, he wouldn't have dared to meet Yi Hong's captivating gaze. After an unknown amount of time, Wu Wenjie finally let out a long breath and put down the brush and stood up. Xiao Kui, who was standing by, came over to take a look and immediately exclaimed, "Wow! It's painted so well, you really didn't brag?" "Xiao Kui, quickly give a generous reward to Master Wu," Yi Hong called out. Immediately, Xiao Kui went to the inner room and took out a brocade pouch and handed it to Wu Wenjie. The brocade pouch felt heavy in his hand. Wu Wenjie was about to open it to take a closer look, when Yi Hong pressed his wrist. Master, whoa, you can't open this brocade pouch until you leave. Wu Wenjie nodded hesitantly. Then he saw Yi Hong give a faint smile. Xiao, Kui, sent Master Wu back. After a while, Wu Wenjie was sent back to the original street corner by Xiao, Kui. By this time, it was already late at night, and it was quiet all around with no one in sight. Wu Wenjie recalled everything that had just happened, and wondered if he was in a dream. Fortunately, the brocade pouch was still in his hand. It was bulging and a bit heavy. When he opened it, he saw a shiny golden color. It was actually a small bag of gold leaves. It was the first time Wu Wenjie had seen so much gold, and he was so startled that he didn't know what to do. He vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he didn't know what it was. I will keep it for now. I will look for it again tomorrow. I hope I can remember the way I walked, and written it to the Ji Hong girl. Wu Wenjie convinced himself in his heart. Although he had full confidence in his painting, he also knew that it couldn't be worth so much money. After finding a cheap inn, Wu Wenjie paid with his own silver, and got a room. Not long after he lay down, he heard someone shouting roughly, "Get up! Everyone get up, it's time for the night inspection." Wu Wenjie gradually put on his clothes, and got up to open the door, and ask what was going on. He heard a lodger joking, "I heard that a major case happened in the city, and the prefect's yamen has ordered the constables to search the inns in this area. Judging by this posture, maybe the prefect's wife was raped by a rapist." While they were talking, several constables had already come to this place. A fierce-looking head constable raised his horsewhip. "Everyone stand against the wall, and submit to the inspection, or you'll be regarded as thieves." Everyone obediently stood against the wall. Several constables rushed into the guest rooms, and started rummaging through chests and cupboards to search. After a while, a constable came out holding a brocade bag, and asked excitedly, "Whose is this?" Wu Wenjie already had a bad feeling at this moment, but he still replied honestly, "It's mine." "Good lad, finally caught you, come with us." A constable put a chain around Wu Wenjie's neck, and dragged him away. Wu Wenjie struggled and tried to defend himself desperately, but he was no match for these fierce constables. In the blink of an eye, he was dragged out by them. Even after they had gone far away, several lodgers were still asking one another, "What's going on? What exactly did that scholar do?" Court is now in session with the powerful and sonorous shouts. Fai Shiking, accompanied by yamen runners, and the clerk calmly took his seat. Suddenly, he slapped the gavel. "The criminal Wu Wenjie, do you admit your guilt?" Although Wu Wenjie was shackled, he still raised his head, and asked in return, "I don't know what crime I've committed." Fai Shiking pointed at the brocade bag on the table. "Is this brocade bag, and the gold leaves inside it, yours?" Wu Wenjie hesitated for a moment and said, "A young lady asked me to paint for her, and gave me these as payment for the painting." "Nonsense, do you think I know nothing about calligraphy and painting?" Fai Shiking sneered. "Do you think you're Tan Bahu or Men Huran? Can an ordinary painting be sold for so many gold leaves? I also know that my painting isn't worth so much money." Wu Wenjie defended himself, "So I plan to return it to that young lady early tomorrow morning." "What's the name of that young lady, and where does she live?" Fai Shiking asked harshly. Wu Wenjie remembered the oaths he had made to Xiao Kui and hesitated for a moment. Then he had to reply honestly, "I can't say. I promised that young lady that I wouldn't tell others her name." The more you make up, the more absurd it becomes." Fai Shiking sneered repeatedly. "Since you can't tell her name, and don't know where she lives, how could you paint for her? And how could a painting be worth so many gold leaves? I think you won't give up until you're faced with dire consequences." Guards, prepare the torture instruments. The yamen runners on both sides rushed forward, grabbed Wu Wenjie's arms, and were about to throw him to the ground. But Wu Wenjie shouted loudly, "Stop, I have an academic title. According to the laws of the Ming dynasty, you can't use torture instruments on me." Fai Shiking sneered, "I didn't expect that you're also well versed in the laws of the Ming dynasty." "Very well. I will follow the laws of the Ming dynasty, and detain you for now. Early tomorrow morning, I will send a letter to the Educational Administration Department to strip you of your academic title first, and then make you admit your guilt. Court is adjourned. The Yamen runners carried Luo Wenjie out without listening to his protests. After everyone had left, two young men slowly walked out from behind the screen. One was Nangong Fan, who was gentle and refined in his manners, and the other was Tang Xiao, with a gloomy and fierce look on his face. Fai Shiking quickly clasped his hands towards the two and said, "Please rest assured, third young master and Master Tang. After stripping that lad of his academic title, I will be able to convict him immediately." Nangong Fan smiled meaningfully. "Your Excellency must enforce the law impartially, and mustn't let the lawbreakers go unpunished." Certainly, third young master, don't worry." Fai Shiking replied and escorted Nangong Fan and Tang Xiao out of the door, with the clerk. After the several people clasped their hands and said goodbye outside the yamen, Tang Xiao couldn't help but complain in a low voice, "I don't understand. To deal with a poor scholar with no connections, why does the young master go to so much trouble? Why not just make him disappear? In such a big city of Yanzhou, probably no one would care if a poor scholar went missing." Nangong Fan smiled lazily. In his opinion, it would be easy to make Luo Wenjie disappear. However, since Luo Zonghan refused to cooperate, could they really wipe out everyone in Luo family village? Now that Luo Wenjie had come to them on his own, if he got involved in a lawsuit, in order to save this scholar, Luo Zonghan would have no choice but to sell the ancestral property. The two of them looked at each other and laughed loudly. When the laughter stopped a little, Tang Xiao suddenly asked in a low voice, "Third young master, have you heard the rumors in the martial arts world? The secret code of Qianmen has reappeared in the martial arts world. It's said that whoever gets it can scheme for the whole world." Nangong Fan sneered, "Humph, such absurd rumors can't be believed at all." "Indeed," Tang Xiao echoed insincerely, "the secret code of Qianmen has always been just a legend in the martial arts world. No one has ever really seen it. Maybe there's no such magical thing in this world at all." The two of them chatted as they walked, and gradually disappeared into the night. In the sky, a dark cloud covered the already dim and hazy moon, making the world even more chaotic and gloomy. The light outside the window was already bright. Luo Wenjie, who had been eagerly waiting for the prefect to interrogate him, so that he could prove his innocence, didn't see the yamen runners coming to take him for interrogation. Instead, he saw his haggard mother and the worried Zhao Zini. Luo Wenjie was very surprised. "Mother, Zini, why are you here?" Lady Wu forced back her tears, and said in a hoarse voice, "We heard that you got into trouble with the law in the city, so Zini accompanied me to see you early this morning." "What exactly did you do? Why were you detained by the authorities?" Luo Wenjie forced a smile, and said casually, "Don't worry. It's just a misunderstanding for the moment. The truth will come out soon." "Mother, don't you know your son's character? Don't you believe me either?" "Silly child," Mother shook her head and sighed, "you don't know how evil the world can be. Even if you're completely innocent, once you're in prison, you'll either die or be seriously harmed." Luo Wenjie smiled nonchalantly and said, "It's not that scary. The prison of the authorities isn't hell. Besides, I'm just temporarily detained. As long as the matter is investigated clearly, it'll be okay. By the way, go and find a girl named Yi Hong. As long as she comes forward to testify, I can be cleared of the charges." "Where does she live?" Mother asked hurriedly. "I only remember it's in the south of the city, but I'm not sure exactly where." Luo Wenjie said. "How did you come to know her?" A trace of suspicion flashed in Zhao Zini's eyes. Luo Wenjie quickly told them about how he happened to meet Xiao, quick painted a portrait for Yi Hong, and received a brocade pouch full of gold leaves. After hearing this, Mother couldn't help stamping her foot and sighing deeply. "Silly child, you've been set up and framed by others, yet you still expect them to come forward and testify for you?" Lady Wu quickly said, "I spoke without thinking. I hope you can forgive me, young master. I beg you to help rescue my son. I will ask the clansmen to give up the Wu family village." Nangong Fan sighed. I heard that he got into trouble with the law as soon as he arrived in Yanzu, but I don't know the specific details. Since you're asking for help, madam, I will go to the prefect's yamen to inquire about it for you. However, this matter has nothing to do with the Wo family village. You mustn't mix them up. Whether Wo Zonghan sells Wo family village to the Nangong family or not, I will do my best to help your son. Thank you, young master Nangong. Hearing Nangong Fan's assurance, Zhao Zhenyi was filled with gratitude and couldn't help bowing gracefully. At this moment she had recognized that this gentle and refined young master in white clothes was the rash fellow who almost ran into her not long ago. Miss, you don't need to be so polite. Nangong Fan pretended to have just recognized her and said in surprise, It's you? Last time, I almost knocked you down with my horse. Before I could apologize, you had already left gracefully. I've been feeling guilty about it all this time. Meeting you again today finally settles one of my concerns. After saying that, he bowed deeply, looking extremely sincere. Young master, you're welcome. Zhao Zhenyi wanted to avoid it, but didn't want to be rude, and suddenly she didn't know what to do. At this moment, her impression of Nangong Fan had completely changed. He didn't seem like the bully who framed Brother Wenjia and ran amok in Yanzu at all. I didn't expect it to be such a coincidence. You're Scholar Luo's sister. For your sake, I will do my best to help you rescue your brother. Nangong Fan said sincerely. Seeing that Zhao Zhenyi was dressed as a girl and was so close to Lady Wo, he took her for Wo Wenjia's sister. I'm not. Zhao Zhenyi blushed with shame, but couldn't explain, so she had to hide behind Lady Wo. Nangong Fan guessed what was going on at a glance, and suddenly had mixed feelings in his heart, but he remained calm on the surface and said cheerfully, So you're Scholar Luo's future wife. Forgive my rudeness, miss, don't worry. I will definitely get your sweetheart out. You can go back and wait for the news at ease. Watching the two of them leave with countless thanks, the smile on Nangong Fan's face gradually turned into a sneer. Tan Xiao beside him quietly said, Your trick really works, young master. I believe that sooner or later, Wo Zonghan will use a Wo family village to ransom that unlucky scholar. Let's ask Prefect Phi to put more pressure on that scholar, and casually charge him with something to scare his mother. I've changed my mind. Nangong Fan coldly watched Zhao Zhenyi's disappearing figure. I want to kill him. Why is that? Tan Xiao looked surprised. Don't we want a Wo family village anymore? I want both a Wo family village and his life. As Nangong Fan said this, the wine cup in his hand shattered with a clang. Tan Xiao followed Nangong Fan's gaze and suddenly understood. He couldn't help but smile ambiguously. Third young master, you're really ambitious. I wonder when I can drink your wedding wine, third young master. You won't have to wait long. Nangong Fan took out a brocade handkerchief and carefully wiped the wine off his fingers. Looking at his long and white fingers, he said coldly, Wo, Wenjia, you don't deserve such good fortune. You'll shorten your lifespan if you try to enjoy it. Bring the criminal to the court. With Prefect Phi's loud shout, several yamen runners immediately dragged Wo Wenjia to the main hall. Phi Shiking slapped the gavel. Kneel down. I'm a respected scholar. I don't kneel when meeting officials. As soon as Wo Wenjia finished speaking, he saw Phi Shiking sneer and throw an official letter down to the court. The Educational Administration Department has already replied. Due to the seriousness of the case, and to facilitate my trial of the case, Scholar Wo Wenjia's academic title has been temporarily revoked. As soon as the words were spoken, the Tiaman runners on the left and right raised their sticks and hit hard at the back of Wo Wenjia's knees. With a painful cry, Wo Wenjia couldn't help but kneel down on the ground. Just as he was dizzy with pain, he saw Phi Shiking pick up a warrant and throw it down to the court. First give him 40 heavy blows with the stick to get rid of his arrogance. The Yamen runners skillfully pushed Wo Wenjia to the ground. The Tiaman runners in charge of punishment raised their sticks and brought them down. In just a few strokes, Wo Wenjia's skin was torn open, and flesh was flying everywhere. Wo Wenjia screamed continuously and soon passed out. He was then woken up by cold water, and vaguely heard the shout in his ear, "Will you confess, or not?" I didn't do anything. What? What do you want me to confess? As soon as Wenjia finished speaking, he heard another harsh shout from the court, still being stubborn. Use the torture device of leg squeezing sticks. His hands were lifted up. Wenjia's consciousness was already a bit hazy, but the pain of the leg squeezing sticks pressing on his fingers still stabbed into his mind like needles. Wenjia gritted his teeth until they bled and shouted towards the sky, "I won't confess, even if you beat me to death." "Very well, I'm still afraid that you'll confess too quickly, and won't get to experience many of the torture devices in this yamen," Fai Shiking said as he threw down another warrant. "Use the whip punishment." Wenjia wavered between pain and unconsciousness. He didn't know how many punishments he had suffered, nor did he know when this hellish experience would end. He could only clench his teeth tightly and keep silent, always firmly believing that his integrity could overcome all evil and darkness. When he woke up from one of the longest comas, he found himself lying in an imprisoned cell. Straws were messily spread under him. The dried blood clots had stuck the straws to his flesh. In his ear there was still a familiar and sad call, "Brother Wenjia, you must wake up." Wenjia struggled to open his eyes, and saw that outside the prison door, his mother and Zini were already in tears. He wanted to smile at them, but didn't have the strength. With all his might, he finally squeezed out a sentence from between his lips to comfort his relatives and himself, "Don't worry. That corrupt official doesn't dare to beat me to death. Otherwise, he won't be able to keep his official position. As long as I don't confess, he won't be able to frame me." As soon as he finished speaking, he passed out again. When Lady Wo and Zhao Xinyi appeared in front of him again, Nangong Fan wasn't surprised at all. Everything was proceeding according to his plan, and he felt a sense of accomplishment from casually toying with other people's fates. However, he didn't let the smugness in his heart show on his face. Instead, he put on a sorrowful expression and rushed to say, "Lady Wo, Miss Zhao, I'm truly ashamed. Due to the seriousness of Scholar Luo's case, there's nothing I can do in a short time. But don't worry. I will definitely try every means to get him out, as soon as possible." Third young master, Lady Wo knelt down with a plop, held the land deed in both hands, and raised it in front of Nangong Fan, crying, "Please rescue my son from prison as soon as possible. Here is the land deed of the Wo family village. We don't dare to ask for a single penny more. We just hope that my son will be safe." "What are you doing?" Nangong Fan looked displeased. "What do you take me for?" "Please accept the land deed, third young master. Otherwise I will die in front of you," Lady Wo said resolutely. Zhao Zini also knelt down and cried, while bowing, "Young master, please save my brother Wenjia. Get up quickly." Nangong Fan was at a loss. Seeing Lady Luo's firm attitude, he had no choice but to reluctantly take the land deed. "Since you're so insistent, madam, I will keep the land deed for you for now. Alas, now that your son is in prison, how can I be in the mood to do business? It's a pity that Scholar Wo doesn't trust me. Otherwise I could go and see him, and tell him to do as I say, and he would surely be able to clear his name soon." Zhao Zini quickly took off a pendant made of rainflower stones from her neck, and carefully held it in front of Nangong Fan. "Please take it and go to see brother Wenjia. It's a gift he gave me. As long as he sees this rainflower stone, he will surely trust you." Nangong Fan was overjoyed and took the rainflower stone, saying, "Go back home and wait for my good news." After seeing the two of them off, Nangong Fan carefully put away the rainflower stone, and then turned to order his attendant, "Take my message to Prefect Phi, and tell him not to allow anyone to visit Wo Wenjia anymore. Scholar Wo, you've suffered a rare greeting woke Wo Wenjia from his daze. Looking up, he recognized that the person was the clerk beside Prefect Phi. He saw the clerk sit down outside the prison door, and say softly to Wo Wenjia through the bars, "If you had confessed to Lear, why would you have to endure such torture?" "I'm innocent. What is there for me to confess?" Wo Wenjia sneered. "I've been counting the days. It's been 12 days since I was detained. According to the laws of the Ming dynasty, if a person can't be convicted within 15 days, he must be released. Even if you torture me, I will fight that corrupt official to the death. I will go to the provincial capital to accuse him of colluding with Nangon, Fan, abusing torture, and framing the innocent. The clerk shook his head regretfully and said, Master, whoa, your temper will cost you your life sooner or later. Now that you're in a difficult situation, do you still refuse to give in? Even if you manage to endure these 15 days, if the case is serious, Prefect Phi can still report to the Judicial Commissioner's office and apply for an extension of the detainee's release. Luo Wenjie knew that what the clerk said was true, but he didn't want to show weakness and insisted, so what? No matter how serious the case is, it can only be extended once. That corrupt official can't keep me locked up forever, and he definitely doesn't dare to let me die in the courtroom. Otherwise, his official position will be in danger. The clerk sighed softly. Master, well, why do you have to risk your life to fight with Prefect Phi? I think you'd better confess. In fact, your case isn't that serious. It's just theft of property. Although the amount is not small, fortunately, all the property has been recovered. And you're a first-time offender. Even if you confess, it won't be a serious crime. If you're lucky, you can get away with it by spending some money. If you're unlucky, at most, you'll have to serve a few months of hard labor. We're both scholars. I really can't bear to see you suffer because of your stubbornness, so I'm pointing out a way out for you. Luo Wenjie sneered, Are you really that kind-hearted? The clerk took out a crystal-clear rainflower stone from his bosom, and asked in a low voice, You don't trust me, an old man? Don't you trust this? Luo Wenjie's face changed drastically. He quickly grabbed it and looked at it over and over again. This is the gift I gave to Zinyi. How did it end up in your hands? Why haven't she and mother come to visit me? The clerk sighed. Your mother has fallen ill in bed because of your matter. Miss Zhao has to ask for help everywhere, and also take care of your mother. How could she have time to visit you? She came to beg me. I sympathize with you as a fellow scholar, so I agreed to help her. This is the keepsake she asked me to give you. How's my mother's condition? Luo Wenjie asked eagerly. The clerk let out a long sigh. Lady Luo has sought help everywhere, but in vain. She's so worried that she has fainted many times. If she can't see you get out soon, I'm afraid. At this point, he couldn't help shaking his head repeatedly, with a look of pity on his face. Mother, your son is unfilial and has made you suffer. Luo Wenjie looked up to the sky and burst into tears. After a long while, he wiped away his tears and asked in a hoarse voice, Thank you, sir, for telling me. If I confess immediately, can I get out soon? You're also proficient in the laws of the Ming dynasty. You should have an idea in your mind. The clerk took out a complaint paper from his bosom. I've already drawn up the complaint paper and reduced the punishment to the lightest. This is the most I can do. Take a look first. If you think it's acceptable, sign and put your fingerprint on it in the main hall. Otherwise, I will have to tell Miss Zhao and Lady Luo that I'm powerless and can't help them. Do Mother and Zinyi also want me to confess? Luo Wenjie asked in a hoarse voice. The clerk comforted him. Don't be sad. Lady Luo and Miss Zhao both know you're innocent. I also believe in you, which is why I'm trying my best to help you. Luo Wenjie quickly read the complaint paper and finally gritted his teeth. I will confess. Tell Prefect Phi that I'm willing to confess. Amid the powerful shouts of the yeoman runners on both sides, the prefect's main hall was solemn and imposing. Phi Shiking looked down at Luo Wenjie kneeling in the hall, and shouted harshly, Criminal Luo Wenjie, are you willing to confess? Luo Wenjie lowered his head aggrievedly, and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, I'm willing to confess. Speak up, I can't hear you. Phi Shiking said lazily. I'm willing to confess. Luo Wenjie gritted his teeth until they bled, and tears couldn't help but stream down his face. Seeing this, Phi Shiking laughed loudly. Once you fall into my hands, even if I accuse you of killing your father and raping your mother, you'll still have to confess. Humph, even if you're willing to confess, you still can't escape the final whipping. for closing the case. Guards first give him 20 heavy whips, and then let him sign, and put his fingerprint on the complaint paper. Several yamen runners immediately pushed Wo Wenjia to the ground, and whipped him hard. Wo Wenjia was in such agony that he felt as if he were dying. After the 20 lashes for closing the case were finished, he was dizzy, and his eyes were blurred. At this time, the clerk came over with the complaint paper, bent down and said, "Sign it. Once you sign it, everything will be okay." Wo Wenjia tremblingly took the wolf-hair brush handed over by the clerk. He wanted to read the complaint paper carefully, but his eyes were already blurred by tears and sweat. Under the clerk's urging, he had no choice but to sign his name where the other pointed. The clerk immediately presented the complaint paper. Fai Shiking took a cursory glance at it, then handed it back to the clerk, and ordered smugly, "Read it out as it is." The clerk held up the complaint paper, and read in a calm voice, "The criminal Wo Wenjia was hired by the prostitute, Yi Hon on the evening of the 27th day of the 9th month in the Jia, Shen, year to paint for her, because he saw that the woman was extremely beautiful, and had a lot of accumulated wealth. The criminal had evil thoughts. When he failed to deceive and swindle her, he resorted to force to rob her. He raped her first, and then killed her and fled with the loot. The criminal was extremely cruel in his means, and the amount of property he robbed was huge. His crimes were so heinous that heaven and us could hardly tolerate them. You tricked me." Wo Wenjia finally realized that he had fallen into another trap, and glared angrily, pointing his finger at the clerk. However, he was pinned to the ground by several yamen runners. Only to hear the clerk continue to read in a calm voice, "The criminal was extremely vicious, and the circumstances of his crime were particularly bad. We hereby report to the Ministry of Punishments and request that he be executed immediately." "I'm wronged," Wo Wenjia shouted loudly, and then passed out. After the news came, Lady Wo was so grief-stricken that she fell ill and couldn't get out of bed. Zhao Fugui also strictly forbade his daughter to have any more contact with the Wo family. But how could Zhao Zhenyi let go of her sweetheart? By then, Wo family village already belonged to the Nangong family completely, and Zhao Fugui had also sold all his farmland to Nangong Fang, and was preparing to move his whole family to Yanzhou. Taking advantage of the chaos during the family's relocation, Zhao Zhenyi secretly escaped and rushed to Yanzhou overnight, going to beg Nangong Fan with her last glimmer of hope. "Miss Zhao," Nangong Fan looked guilty, "I'm really powerless. This case has already been firmly established by the prefect Yamen. It's as difficult as climbing to the sky to reverse the verdict." "Master Nangong," Zhao Zhenyi knelt down in tears, "please think of another way. As long as you can rescue brother Wenjia, I'm willing to be your servant and repay your great kindness." "What are you doing, Miss Zhao? Get up quickly." Nangong Fan helped Zhao Zhenyi up without hesitation, and shook his head with a look of embarrassment on his face. "Alas! It's difficult, so difficult." Seeing that the famous young master Nangong in Yanzhou was also powerless, Zhao Zhenyi burst into tears, and was extremely sad. Seeing this, Nangong Fan took out a brocade handkerchief, lovingly, gently wiped away Zhao Zhenyi's tears, and comforted her softly. "Miss Zhao, don't be like this. You're in such a state now, and it makes me feel so sad too." Grief had made Zhao Zhenyi's senses dull. She didn't even notice when Nangong Fan gently embraced her. It was only when Nangong Fan was about to kiss her lips that she suddenly realized it and hurriedly escaped. "I'm sorry." Nangong Fan's face was full of shame as he repeatedly blamed himself. I really shouldn't have done this, but I couldn't help myself. Ever since I happened to meet you in Wo family village, your voice and smile have often appeared in my dreams, making me unable to extricate myself. I've thought about asking someone to propose marriage on my behalf many times, but I was afraid that you wouldn't be willing, so I could only bury this longing in my heart. Just now, seeing you so grief-stricken, I couldn't bear it, and was momentarily confused and offended you. I deserve to die. I'm willing to accept your punishment." As he said this, he knelt down on the ground. Nangong Fan's self-reproach made Zhao Zhenyi feel a little relieved. Looking at Nangong Fan, the famous third young master of the Nangong family in Yanzhou, Zhao Zhenyi hesitated with a complicated expression for a long while. Finally, she gritted her teeth and made a painful and helpless decision in her heart. She suddenly turned around, forced down the pain in her heart, and tried her best to say in a calm voice, "Master, Nangong, brother, Wenjia, and I have been close friends since childhood, just like brother and sister. As long as you can save brother Wenjia's life, I will obey whatever you ask. Besides that, even if I become a nun, and never marry for the rest of my life, I don't dare to accept your kindness." Nangong Fang hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and nodded, "All right. I will do my best to save his life." In just a moment, he had already made up his mind, in his heart. Even if he was going to spare Wu Wenjia's life, he would still exile him thousands of miles away, send him to a place where he could never come back, a place closest to hell. Outside the west gate of Yangzhou city, several serious criminals sentenced to be exiled to the frontier were saying their final goodbyes to their families. Cries and shouts mingled together, and the scene was very chaotic. Wu Wenjia, wearing shackles and chains, had a dirty face and a dull expression, except for his eyes, which still had a bit of liveliness. He kept anxiously searching among the crowd. "Stop looking. No one else will come." The clan uncle who came to see him off said gloomily. He was the second son of Wu Zonghan. Although he was Wu Wenjia's clan uncle in terms of seniority, he was only a few years older than Wu Wenjia, and was usually on the best of terms with him. "Where's my mother? Why didn't she come? And what about Xinyi?" Wu Wenjia asked eagerly, but he saw the clan uncle gloomily lower his head. "Your mother fell ill because of your matter and passed away 3 days ago with deep resentment. My father was also hit hard by this, and is on the verge of death. I'm afraid hell. As for Miss Zhao, you'd better not ask." "Mother," Wu Wenjia called out softly, but there were no more tears in his eyes. After being dazed for a long while, he suddenly asked again, "Tell me, why didn't Xinyi come?" The clan uncle hesitated for a moment, and then said resentfully, "She has already married Nangong Fang as a concubine, and won't come again." Wu Wenjia trembled all over, and the suspicion in his heart finally became a terrible reality. He angrily raised his head, wanting to question the heavens. Had she really been tempted by Nangong Fang's family background and appearance, and joined forces with him to deceive him? Just then, he saw the familiar figure in the distance, a figure that haunted his dreams, and was both loved and hated. With difficulty, he took off the rainflower stone that had convinced him to confess from his neck. Wu Wenjia suddenly rushed out of the crowd, and stumbled towards a woman with tears streaming down her face in the distance. He wanted to question her. Why did even the relatives he trusted the most cruelly deceive him? "The prisoner has escaped," someone shouted. Several guards immediately chased after him, and knocked him to the ground with their clubs. Wu Wenjia struggled to crawl forward, holding the rainflower stone with the word heart engraved on it high in his hand and shouting hoarsely, "Why? Why did you deceive me?" A guard's club hit Wu Wenjia's wrist heavily, knocking the rainflower stone flying. Without listening to his protests, the several guards beat him with their clubs, making him roll around on the ground. Just then, suddenly, a rebuke came from the distance, "Stop it. You beat him to death like this." The several guards looked in the direction of the voice, and saw a convoy of escorts coming along the road. On the escort flag was a big character "Shu." Under the escort flag, a young girl in red, about 14 or 15 years old, was valiant and heroic, slowly riding her horse towards them. Although the girl was young, she had a natural boldness. Despite being travel-worn, it couldn't hide her true nature and natural beauty that only existed in the martial arts world. Obviously, the rebuke just now could only come from the mouth of such a young girl, in the martial arts world, who didn't care about propriety, and had no fear of anything. "Who the hell is butting in?" one of the guards cursed. As soon as the words left his mouth, the girl whipped over with a swish, and scolded harshly, "Watch your mouth." The guard instinctively turned his head. Although he avoided getting hit on the face, the whip still landed firmly on his shoulder. With a painful cry, he raised his club and was about to fight back. The girl immediately jumped off her horse, holding the whip upside down, and getting ready for a fight. Yanan, stop it! A middle-aged man with a weather-beaten face stepped forward from the escort convoy, and shouted at the girl. Then he turned to the guards, and clasped his hands with a smile. Gentlemen, please don't take it to heart because of my daughter. I wondered who it was. The leading guard smiled, and returned the salute. So it's escort chief Shu. You really should discipline your daughter well. I haven't seen her for a few years, and suddenly she's all grown up. I didn't expect her to become even more headstrong and willful. Indeed, the middle-aged man sighed. It's all because her mother passed away early and I'm always busy with escorting. How could I have time to discipline her? I had no choice but to let her hang out with those street boys, and as a result, she developed this fearless and bad-tempered personality, getting into trouble every now and then. That's why I had to take her out on escort missions with me. Then he turned to the girl. Put away your whip and apologize to these uncles. Dad, they were the ones who cursed first. The girl pouted, looking very reluctant. Forget it anyway. I watched her grow up. Don't I know her temper? The guard leader smiled and waved his hand. Then he turned around and told his subordinates to put away their clubs. After that, he clasped his hands and bowed to the middle-aged man. Escort chief Shu, have a safe journey. We should also hit the road now. Farewell for now. I will come to your place for a drink some other day. Sure, you're always welcome. Escort chief Shu quickly clasped his hands and returned the salute. Let's go, the guard leader shouted and called his men. Ignoring the family's pleas and wails, they escorted the prisoners and set off. Luo Wenjia was completely unaware of what was happening around him. He just lay on the ground, looking for the lost rainflower stone. When he finally saw the stone, and was about to crawl over to pick it up, he was forcibly lifted up by the guards and dragged away without a word. Luo Wenjia kicked his legs wildly and struggled desperately, mumbling, "My heart. My heart." The girl in red watched sympathetically as Luo Wenjia was dragged away. Just as she was about to turn around and mount her horse, she suddenly noticed something shiny and translucent at her feet. She picked it up and saw that it was a beautiful rainflower stone. The girl held it in her palm and examined it carefully. Immediately, she saw the naturally formed character heart and couldn't put it down. She casually put it around her neck. At this moment, she suddenly heard her father shout, "Yanan, hurry up." Coming, the girl replied sweetly, mounted her horse, whipped it, and the bay horse galloped away. Soon, she caught up with the escort convoy that was already far away. A ladle of cold water was splashed heavily on Wenjia's face, finally waking him up from the nightmare. He opened his eyes and looked around blankly. What he saw was the endless yellow sand and the lonely and desolate small post station. It took him a long while to remember that he had traveled thousands of miles from Yanzi to Gansu, and was now on his way to Qinghai under escort. Good lad, you managed to endure all this. Scarface lifted Luo Wenjia's face and examined it carefully for a moment. Then he suddenly gave him a thumbs up. Impressive. Even if you're a bastard, you're an impressive bastard. I've seen many fierce robbers and bandits, but I've never seen a bastard as tough as you. All right, from today on, I will treat you like a man, and won't make things difficult for you anymore. I will safely send you to your destination. After saying that, Scarface turned to the people behind him and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Pack up, and let's hit the road." A small team of prisoners wearing shackles and chains, driven by the whips and clubs of several guards, continued to set off on the difficult journey under the intense sun of the Gobi Desert, not knowing where it would end.